For Crema Media's Polity, I'm Sane Dlamini. Political analyst Aubrey Majiqi discusses his latest column titled State Capture Again. So what do you think should be a much broader conception of the phenomenon and tendency of state capture?
Well, the first thing to understand is that almost always the state is captured. And here I'm not talking only about the South African state. I'm talking about states generally. Because you must look at the state as a contested terrain. Different groups, different forces divided along ideological and other lines compete for control over the state. But actually, the competition is over state resources. So for me, there is never a time when the state is not captured. When it seems the state is not captured, it is because there is a stalemate between the dominant forces that are fighting over control over the state. But remember, what happens in the global sphere is that those economic interests that are dominant must be replicated at a regional level, a continental level, and at a country level. And in countries and regions where governments, in terms of their policies, are ideologically not in line with those dominant interests in the global economy, what will happen is that they must be brought in line. And one of the ways in which you bring them in line is by capturing regions, by capturing continents, by capturing countries, by capturing states. So if you look at the post-apartheid state, you must ask yourself, which forces have been in competition for control of the post-apartheid state? Some of them are in the ANC, some are outside the ANC, some are in the global terrain. So by the time in South Africa you start screaming state capture, focusing narrowly on what the Guptas have done, we are actually focusing on the tip of the iceberg.
Aubrey, you are addressing 8 things that you say we need to remember about any form of political discourse. What exactly do you mean when you say the content of our political discourse is socially constructed and is populated by a contest between different and conflicting subjective interests at a personal and collective level?
Well, we tend to think that when people make an argument, for instance, in support of the notion of state capture or against the notion of state capture, they are doing so innocently. They are doing so from a neutral position, from a disinterested position, and therefore from a valueless position. When actually, almost every representational discourse, including political debate, is value-laden. People bring their race, they bring their ethnicity, they bring their political agendas, they bring their ideological agendas, they bring their personal interests or the collective interests of the groups they represent to such debates. Because these debates are not for entertainment. These debates are about altering both the political and economic environment to the advantage of those who enter the debate. So when you talk about the economy, for instance, our commentators, to a large extent, are what I say the court jesters of capital. Because it doesn't matter what radio station you listen to at 6 o'clock. You might as well listen to the same station every day. Because on every station, you're going to hear different commentators basically saying the same thing. The same thing on television. So in my view, economic commentary is seldom different from motor car journalism. Because those who do it tend to work for dominant interests in the economy. So what must they do? They must reflect those interests. They must defend those interests. They must regurgitate the logic of those interests. So they don't enter these debates innocently. And that's what I mean when I say that the kinds of discourse we have in the country about the economy and politics are value-laden and therefore socially constructed.
But how do you explain your third point that says political reality is created by both the truth and lies?
Let me give you an example. So we are told that the so-called black Africans of South Africa came from Central Africa. I'm one of those who accept that as a historical fact. Whether I'm right or wrong is another question altogether, but I accept it as a historical fact. And then we are also told that when the white colonizers came, South Africa was empty. The interior of South Africa was empty because we were still walking from Central Africa to the interior of South Africa. That is a lie. But the combination of what may be a fact, the fact that so-called black Africans came from Central Africa, and the lie that the interior was empty when the white men came to South Africa, can be potent because that bit of truth reinforces the lie and gives it the appearance of the truth. So in politics and in the economic discourse, that's what we do. We do that using many devices. For instance, you can make statistics say what they are not saying. We confuse deliberately facts with the truth. Facts are not always the truth because you can use facts to come to conclusions that are untruthful. That's what I'm talking about.
On the fourth point that you say you will keep on repeating about the manipulation of perception and the manipulation of state institutions, politicians, and the political commentariat in its various incarnations, why do you keep on repeating it?
Well, actually what I keep on repeating, and I will keep on repeating it until I have no cause to repeat it anymore. I make the argument that we're quite reductionist in South Africa about political battles. We reduce political battles to soccer matches, and we become cheerleaders. Either I'm a cheerleader for Orlando Pirates, or I'm a cheerleader for Kaizer Chiefs. Now, being a cheerleader for Pirates, I think is forgivable. The other, I'm not sure about. But the point I'm making is this. Then we become cheerleaders for certain factions in political battles or for certain individuals. We even start looking at political reality through their eyes of those we like. So what do? We then declare that in these political battles, there are those who are angels, and then there are those who are devils. What I keep on repeating is that in these battles, there are no devils, there are no angels. What you have are angels with horns and devils with halos. And what these angels with horns and devils with halos have in common is a God complex. And because they suffer from a God complex, they have a poor understanding of the limits of their own power. And they have a poor understanding of the limits of their own power simply because they think that the actions of their opponents are always predictable. So in reality, as recent events have shown, there are no angels, there are no devils, but the creature that is the most dangerous is the creature that is not an angel, but has succeeded in making itself look like an angel, or has succeeded in convincing the rest of us that it is an angel. That creature can get away with almost anything until it is caught. So what I'm saying is this. A decade from now, we will turn around and realize that the angels of 2018 were actually the devils of 2018.
You also speak about the banks and you say they closed the bank accounts of the Guptas just to avoid many things, but reputational damage was not one of them. What do you think was the main reason?
Well, the banks say they closed the Gupta accounts because they were trying to avoid reputational damage. And I say pull the other one. The apartheid government had bank accounts. This was a murderous government that lacked credibility. And the banks kept the accounts of the apartheid government, apartheid ministers, apartheid murderers. They did not close them. Now, let's come to our current period. Many an allegation has been made against Jacob Zuma. Did they close his accounts? No, they didn't. Jackie Silebi, when he was Commissioner of Police, many allegations were made before he was convicted. Did they close his accounts? No. Glenn Agliotti, many allegations were made against him. Brett Cabell, many allegations were made against him. Did they close their accounts? No, they didn't. And therefore, I am convinced that the banks had many reasons for closing the accounts of the Guptas. But reputational damage was not one of them. In addition to that, the Guptas would not have gotten away with the nefarious activities it is alleged they were engaging in without the help of rogue lawyers, rogue bankers, rogue auditors, and so on. So actually, if we must get to the root of the problem, as far as the Guptas are concerned, we will have to dig out the rogue lawyers, the rogue bankers, the rogue auditors, because it's inconceivable that if all the allegations that are being made against the Guptas are true, it is inconceivable that they would succeed in doing it without the helps of these rogue elements. The problem with the debate around state capture and the role of the banks is that there are questions you cannot ask. For instance, you can ask with applause from the cheerleaders whether there is any ANC leader or leaders who tried to influence to reopen the accounts of the Guptas. But you cannot ask whether there's any leader or leaders of the ANC who influenced the banks to close the accounts of the Guptas. I think both questions are questions we must ask.
And lastly, when we touch on what is on the news these days, what is your take on the recent testimony of Finance Minister Nhlanhla Nene at the Zondo Commission, as well as his public apology?
Look, I must be honest. The Zondo Commission so far for me is a huge disappointment, particularly the evidence leaders. My understanding as a lay person, and maybe that's the problem, maybe the problem is that I'm a lay person, and therefore my understanding is limited. My understanding is that the evidence leader helps the commission to get to the truth. Does not help those who testify to simply repeat allegations. And that is why I'm referring to this commission as a commission of allegations. Because the evidence leaders are not probing. The lie that was told by Minister Nene was not exposed by the commission. If my memory serves me well, it was exposed by ENCA. And it was not exposed by the commission because the evidence leaders are not probing. They are content with having people go there, making speeches, and essentially repeating allegations, most of which are already in the public domain. And therefore, I must be honest, I'm disappointed with the commission. Now, this commission is important. Because as I said in my previous column, by the time Jacob Zuma departs the political stage, corruption in the state is no longer endemic, but has become systemic, meaning it is the dominant culture in the state. Rent-seeking, the looting of state resources, and other forms of venal activities have become deeply entrenched in the culture of the state. So I have no doubt that there has been a problem of an entrenched culture of corruption in the state. But it coincides with an entrenched culture of corruption at two levels. One, the entrenched culture in the private sector, and an entrenched culture in the nexus between the private sector and the public sector, as we have seen with the scandals around the auditing firms. And therefore, for me, we can talk about state capture, that's fine. But state capture is a very small reality that is part of a much bigger problem of an entrenched culture of corruption.
That was Aubrey Majiki speaking to Crima Media's Polity about state capture again.